Okay, so I have put practice test 2 online as the online version in addition to the old paper version. And as I did with practice test 1, I'm going to do a walkthrough of it to help you see how it works online, and then also just to help you review the material. So here we are in student view for this course. If you go to modules and then go to week 3, you should see test 2 practice there. The one with the little rocket is the interactive online version. So you can go there. Now, instead of having 10 questions, this one actually has 19 because question 1 has been broken up into 10 parts. I'll show you that. So we begin here. And you can see that questions 1 through 10 are these 1-point multiple choice questions. What these are substitutes for what we did in what I did in the paper version of the test here. So as you can see in the paper version of the test, what I had you do was simply write out the 5 characteristic truth tables for the 5 basic connectives. And the reason I did that was because you're going to need to have these completely internalized and memorized going forward. Now we're online, and so there's not a good way to put a form like this one in front of you. Also, all the tests are open book and open note because I don't feel like I can police you while you're taking the tests. I still, though, want you to be able to really instinctively and immediately write out all these truth tables. So what I have done is I have created a bank that actually asks you one question. There's one question in the test bank about each of these boxes that you might have to fill in. And then then Canvas is going to pick 10 of those at random. Some of them are weighted so that you're sure to get some of the trickier ones. But for the most part, it's random. And so you're just going to be asked to fill in single lines on these truth tables. So let's go back to the sample quiz and I'll show you what I mean. So here, if A is false and B is false, what is the truth value for A if and only if B? So what I'm asking you about there is essentially this line down here in the original truth table, right? A is false and B is false, and now you need to know what goes for A if and only if B. And you should remember that the biconditional is true when the two sides match. So this one is true. Oh, and I've scrolled down a bit. That's actually question 3. Let's go back up and look at question 1. If A is true and B is true, what is the truth value for A implies B? So when you're looking at the test here, this is the table for A implies B. A is true, B is true, and I'm asking you about the truth value that goes there. If you've got the answer sheet version of the test in front of you, you can see that it's true. And I'm not stopping you from looking at answer sheets, but I am encouraging you to try and have this as memorized as possible. So this one is true. And a lot of these are really simple. If A is true, what is the truth value for not A? That's false, right? That one's easy. If A is false and B is true, what about A and B? Well, both sides have to be true for this to be true, so this is false. If A is true and B is true, what about A if and only if B? That's true when the two sides match. If A is false and B is true, what about this? It's false when the two sides don't match. If they're both true, the and statement is true. All right. For number 8, this one's one of the tricky ones. You've got a conditional here, but the left side is false. And in ordinary English, if-then statements are ambiguous. It's not clear what you mean about the situation where the if clause doesn't hold true. And for our truth tables, we just arbitrarily say that it is true the conditional is true when the antecedent is false. So that applies for 8. That also applies for 9. Okay, A is true and B is true. What is the truth value for A or B? This is another one where the English is ambiguous, right? Because our English word or is ambiguous between the inclusive or and the exclusive or. This would be true if we're dealing with the inclusive or, and that is how our system of logic works, right? So that one is true. So the first 10 questions are the same in the online version, are just one way of realizing the first question in the paper version. The other questions in the online version map on 1-to-1, so these are all 10-point questions. So the next question set was the translation exercise, where we translate from English into our symbolic language. And on the paper practice test, I gave you 3 questions using this translation key. And actually, for the online version, it's selecting 3 questions at random from a larger database. So in that way, the questions are more realistic than the paper version. Okay. The other thing is that you now are going to need to type bits of SL into Canvas. And so I've chosen our symbols in SL so that for the most part you can just use them as you can just use regular symbols in the typewriter. But because Canvas is picky, we need to be clear on a few things. So over here I say for the conditional you want hyphen right bracket, biconditional left bracket hyphen right bracket. For the disjunction, I want you to do it the way they do it on Carnap, where you're actually typing the backslash and then the forward slash together to get a big V. All right. And I will be checking all of these manually, so even if the computer doesn't recognize what you're trying to say, I'll probably be able to figure it out. Okay. So let's look at this. If we disobey the gods, that's B, but also sacrifice a virgin, that's C, and but is the same as and, so we say and C, then the gods will still punish us. So that becomes A there. Okay, the next 2 questions are short if-then statements. And the tricky thing here is to remember things about the difference between if and only if, and then also that the word order in English is flexible in a way that it's not in sentential logic. So look, the gods will punish us is A. If we disobey their laws is B. The if here introduces the antecedent. So this one is actually B implies A. Whereas we go down here and it says the gods will punish us only if we disobey their laws. Now the only if introduces the consequent. So this one is A implies B. The gods will punish us as A, we disobey their laws as B, and only if indicates a necessary condition, so the arrow just plops down right where the only if is in the English sentence. Next up are ones where you have to provide your own dictionary. So these you have to enter as essay questions or short answer questions. There's a blank here. So what you need to do for these, and this is important, is write both the sentence and your translation key. And you can use any letters you want for your translation key. I'm in the habit of always starting with A because it makes things simpler for me. So let's say A is you have lived, and B is you have experienced heartbreak. Experienced heartbreak. Notice that the original English says you have not lived, and I have changed that into the positive form, you have lived, and then I'm going to represent the not with a negation in our symbolic language. The other thing you need to remember about this one is that unless can be easily represented as or. So this then becomes not A or B, like that. Next up is a Nietzsche quote. This one has 4 parts. One will not go too far wrong if one attributes extreme actions to vanity, average ones to habit, and petty ones to fear. So why don't we make A, one will go too far wrong. And again, we want to then put the negation in the sentence part. And then the next 3 are each going to get their own letters, and I'm going to save myself some time here by cutting and pasting and then adjusting the grammar. We don't want the if. The if isn't part of the sentence. So B, one attributes extreme actions to vanity. And then average ones to habit isn't a sentence on its own. So what you want to say here is C, one attributes average actions to habit. And then D, one attributes petty actions to fear. Now the other thing to note here is that the if clause is at the end of this sentence. If introduces the antecedent. So actually what this one is B and C, I'm sorry, B and C and D implies A, like that. All right, 16 asks you to translate a whole passage and put it in canonical form, or also what we're calling this semester standard form. And so the number one mistake that people make in this part is not doing standard form or doing standard form for the English. So let me show you what you're supposed to do here. First, you want to go through and see how many sentence letters you'll need. And so this is an imaginary scene from an old TV show that I like. Either The Secret is in the books or it's on the internet. Those are 2 atomic statements. So I'm going to write out A, the secret is in the old books, and B, the secret is on the internet. Notice that I've rewritten this so that each of these work properly as separate sentences, right? And the either or is not included in the dictionary. The either or is going to be represented by the sentential connective. If it is in the old books, that is some A again. Giles will find it. So C, Giles will find the secret. If it's on the internet, Willow will find it. D, Willow will find the secret. And then those are the 4 letters you need to understand this passage. And then you can just do it like this. P1, either the secret is in the old books or on the internet, so that is A, or B. P2, if it is in the old books, Giles will find it. So that's A implies C. P3, if it's on the internet, B implies D, conclusion C or D, like that. And I'm sorry, the box they provide is really small, so you'll have to wind up scrolling up and down to see everything you've got there. But that's how you would answer that question. 17 and 18 are something that we didn't do in the homework, but I do want you to be able to do for the test. And it's fairly straightforward. It's just translating in the other direction, right? So one way of thinking about this is you can just plop in the sentences from the dictionary like that in the order that they appear. So for this sentence, it's just A, B, and C, right? Scott pays the rent, Ashley pays the rent, the family gets evicted. And then what you can see is that this is an if-then statement. The main connective is that conditional. So we're going to say if, and then. And what's going on here? We've got not A or B. So really that is if neither Scott nor Ashley pay the rent, then the family will be evicted. Right? And so you've rendered that into a short idiomatic English phrase. A, if and only if not B, our 2 sentences are Scott pays the rent and Ashley pays the rent. So Scott pays the rent if and only if Ashley does not pay the rent. And then the last question on this is a multiple choice question about some of the metalogical terms, in this case, syntax and semantics. What is the difference between syntax and semantics? The answer is that syntax is just the structure of the language without considering meaning, whereas semantics includes meaning. So the correct answer is the first one here. And then after we do all that, we can hit submit. Yes, I'm ready to submit.